Today, we are going on a journey through the feminist thought of the 20th century. We're going to focus on three thinkers who completely changed how we understand what it even means to be a woman.
And our whole story really kicks off with this single, iconic line from the philosopher Simone de Beauvoir way back in 1949. This one sentence basically lit a fuse, and it's the central puzzle we're going to try and unravel together.
So, what on earth does that actually mean? To become a woman instead of just being born one? Well, that question is our launch pad, and you're going to see the answers just get more and more interesting from here.
But hang on. Before we get into all the big ideas, we have to understand the world that sparked them in the first place, right? These theories weren't just thought up in a vacuum. They were a direct response to real, tangible, deeply rooted inequalities.
Take a look at this quote from a 2005 study on poverty in Brazil. It just cuts right to the chase, doesn't it? It shows us that gender inequality isn't some standalone issue. It gets tangled up with race and with class, creating these complex layers of struggle. This isn't just theory. This is the reality for millions of people.
And this struggle, it's not just economic. Back in 1993, the United Nations officially declared that violence against women is a human rights violation. But the key part, the thing you really need to hear, is that it's rooted in historically unequal power relations. That idea of power, we're going to come back to that again and again.
Okay, so with all that in mind, let's go back to the thinker who really got the ball rolling, Simone de Beauvoir. She was the one who gave us a whole new language to start questioning the world around us. So, who was she? De Beauvoir was a French philosopher writing right after World War II, and her book, The Second Sex, was an absolute bombshell, because it took a sledgehammer to the idea that, for women, biology is destiny.
So, back to that famous line, becoming a woman. What she meant was that society teaches girls how to be feminine. It's like you're handed a script, a role you're supposed to learn and play. And this whole process, she said, positions woman as the other. Man is treated as the default, the universal standard. And woman is only defined in relation to him, as the second sex.
Okay, so if society builds this cage, how do you get out? For de Beauvoir, the answer was crystal clear: economic freedom. She argued that through work, through financial independence, women could gain real, concrete freedom and finally start to dismantle that second sex status. Now, de Beauvoir's work was absolutely foundational. But what it also did was blow the doors open for even newer, more complicated questions. If woman is a social construct, then how exactly does that connect to power and to history? And wait a minute, is woman even a single, stable thing to begin with? And this is exactly where our second thinker, the American historian Joan Scott, steps onto the stage. In the 1980s, she took this whole conversation to a completely different level by looking at gender not just as a social role, but as a core piece of how power actually works.
So Scott's a historian, right? And her brilliant idea was to treat gender itself as a historical thing, something that changes over time and gets used for very specific, often political reasons.
Here's the crucial move she made. She argued that historians shouldn't just be writing the history of women. No, they should be using gender as a lens, as a tool to analyze all of history. The question becomes, how have our ideas about what's masculine and what's feminine been used to organize entire societies and to justify who gets power and who doesn't? And this quote just nails it. For Joan Scott, gender isn't some side issue. It is central. Just think about how we use words like manly to describe strong leaders, or how feminine qualities are sometimes used to dismiss political opponents. Gender, she says, is literally baked into the language of power. So we've gone from de Beauvoir's becoming to Scott's analysis of power, and now we get to our third thinker, Judith Butler. And Butler throws down a radical challenge, not just to gender roles, but to the very idea that any of us has a stable identity at all.
Butler's big book, Gender Trouble, drops in 1990, and it pushes this whole conversation into wild new territory that some people found really unsettling and a lot of other people found incredibly liberating. And the core idea is something called gender performativity.
Okay, let's really break this one down, because this idea is a total game changer. Butler argues that it's not that we have an inner gender that we then express outwardly. Instead, our gender is something we do every single day. Think about it. The way you walk, the way you talk, the clothes you wear, these are all learned behaviors. And it's the constant, stylized repetition of all these little acts that creates the illusion of a natural core gender identity.
And then Butler takes this idea and aims it right back at feminism itself. She basically asks, if feminism tries to define woman in one single way, well, who gets left out? What about women of different races, classes, or sexualities? For Butler, insisting on one unified identity for woman risks creating the very same kinds of exclusions the movement was supposed to be fighting against.
So let's step back for a second. What do we get when we put all three of these thinkers together? We get this incredible evolution of an idea, a journey from thinking of gender as something we become to something used for power, to something we actively do.
You can really see the whole story right here in the questions they asked. De Beauvoir kicked the door open by separating biology from our social roles. Joan Scott marched right through that door to analyze how those roles get tied up in the machinery of power. And then Judith Butler comes along and questions if there's even a stable person behind the role to begin with.
All right, so if you're going to take away 3 big ideas from all this, let them be these. 1. Gender is a social construct, not just your biological destiny. 2. Gender is always, always, always tangled up with power. And 3. Maybe, just maybe, our gender is less about who we are deep down and more about what we repeatedly do every day.
And look, this isn't just a bunch of abstract academic stuff. These ideas have fundamentally changed how we talk about pretty much everything today, from fighting for equal pay at work to understanding the huge, diverse spectrum of personal identity. They've literally given us a new vocabulary for understanding ourselves and our world.
Which brings us right to our final question, and it's a provocative one. Given how completely central these ideas are to understanding our society and ourselves, why does the conversation around gender still get so heated? Who exactly is afraid to talk about it? And what does that fear tell us? That's something to think about.